Good day, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of LiR Confidential on lirmedia.tv. And our usual email pertains to it. It's info@lirmedia.tv if you want to make any comments on the show. And all our shows are up on our YouTube channel, and press the red button to subscribe. It's free of charge. I'm delighted to welcome into the studio this morning Noel Malone. Welcome, Noel, to the show.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, Noel Malone, for anyone who might know him, he sent me an extensive CV. I don't know why he's still standing with all the things he's done from where he came from until now. But he is, as you can see, he's still alive and very well indeed. Noel, you're a parish man. You're from St. Mary's Parish. You grew up there with your dad, who was a stonemason.
I am indeed, yeah. The Malones actually go back a long, long time in the parish. My father's family were originally from Petersell, which is just off of Nicholas Street, if you know it. And he built a house in 1949 in the corner of Lunker Street and Mary Street. It's still there, thankfully, within the family. And at the time, you know, he was a stonemason and there was no work in Ireland in the 40s. So he went to Canada with my mum, and they got married in Canada. And they were just like, obviously there was great work and great potential at the time. And when my mum got pregnant with my eldest sister, she got terribly homesick and she came home, and people didn't fly around like they are today. You know, it took the long road. So she came home and had the baby here in Limerick. And in fact, we have the telegram which my grandfather sent to my father on the birth of my sister Diane, and it's something very precious. But he followed home then shortly afterwards, and they moved into the house in Mary Street, number 28 in the corner, and that's where we started, and that's where we went.
And your dad, as I said at the top, was a master stonemason and a good reputation as well. How come you didn't follow the family? Because usually you have a father, a grandfather, a father, a son, and a grandson in these families, as we know, you know?
Yeah, there are a lot of Malones actually in the family, cousins and whatever, and going back generations and generations in the stonemason line. My dad really never pushed me in any particular direction. I think he perceived, or it was perceived, that I was a bit of a bookworm or whatever. You know, I wasn't like the traditional guys who were rushing out to build houses. I think I wanted the easier life, I thought, at the time. And so I just never kind of went that direction. And it wasn't, I actually worked with him most summers when I was a young fella. So I know what it's like to be on a building site, and, you know, I was a labourer and that. So maybe that put me off, because it wasn't an easy life, you know. And the other thing, Pat, is it must be remembered that while today a stonemason is an exceptionally well-paid job and they're very hard to find and all that, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, it was tough, and they weren't appreciated. There were times when my dad was unemployed, you know, so like, I think that there was the sense that this was a very tough existence. And, you know, we were living in the time where all of us went to college. You know, my parents wouldn't have gone to college like a lot of people of that generation. So I think just life took a different course, and, you know, here I am, you know.
And where did you go to school, Noel, your early schooling?
Yeah, my early schooling was in St. Mary's Infant School, which is below there. My sisters went to the secondary there and the primary. I went to there up to first class, taught by a sister Alcantara. She's long gone now, and I was with her for about 2 years. She was a marvelous lady. And then I went across to St. Senan's, which had only really opened up. It was a Christian Brothers boys' school. It's now the home of the, I think it's a music school, from the Redemptorist Music School, I think. And I went there for 5 or 6 years. Again, a wonderful leader there in Brother Leonard. He really was exceptional. And I had him for 4th, 5th and 6th class. So I really got very friendly with him. And, you know, that was my time from there. And I was intending to go to the likes of St. Munchin's or Sexton Street, where most of the lads would have gone. But my brother Leonard, who was the principal there, had a word with my mum. And in those days, you know, you didn't decide where you were going. You go where your parents sent you. So they decided that I was to go to Art Scoil, and I didn't really want to go at all because I didn't know anyone. Everyone was to go with their friends. So what happened was that it coincided. The entrance exam, I remember, was on the same day as my confirmation. So I said, "Oh, that's me off the hook." No. It was arranged that I did it on my own a week or so later. So that's where I ended up in Art Scoil, and I really loved my time there, I must say.
And you mentioned a few things there, Noel, about teachers being extremely important. Sometimes they can decide your future without you knowing it. If you follow, they'd inspire you to be the best, and it's very important that way, But you finished in Art Scoil. Had you any idea what you were going to do when you were finishing up there, or had you something in your head?
Well, at that time, if you can kind of put yourself back, we're talking about, I think my leaving year was 1982. So we're talking about the growth of Wang, if you remember it, in Limerick. It was a huge
I remember Wang, yes.
Yeah, manufacturing company. And it was probably the first after Ferenca and all those where masses of employment happened. And so a lot of the boys in my class in Art Scoil actually went directly to work in Wang. It was like not everyone went to college even then. As today it's a completely different affair. It was kind of nearly the I suppose maybe about 30-40% would have gone to college, but certainly the majority would have gone working in all sorts of different areas. So that was one possibility, but I kind of had an interest in education. Even as a young fella, I was very influenced, as you said there, Pat, by the likes of Sister Alcantara, but also Brother Leonard, the principal in St. Senans. He definitely had a huge impact on me. But the other thing I had was an interest in the church. So I think my mum wanted me to be an accountant or something. She had this idea in her head and I certainly wasn't going to be very good at that. So when I left school, I went to Limerick Institute of Technology doing, I think it was accounting technician or something. I can't remember exactly. And I absolutely hated it. So after about a few months, I left that and I took a job with Aer Lingus in Shannon. And I worked with Aer Lingus and I absolutely adored that job. Ground staff, and I was in the uniform and everything. My mum was delighted. And we had I got to see an awful lot of the world in my time. But when I was out there then, it was really Shannon in his glory days. There was like such work going on and such fun. Yeah, it really was fantastic for a young lad. And I got to meet so many people. It really was awe-inspiring. So, but I still had the graw maybe perhaps to become a priest. So my mum and dad were supportive, but they certainly weren't pushing me in that direction. My mum would have been quite, traditional Catholic lady, would have been into novenas and all that kind of stuff. And, there were different times. So I went anyway, left Aer Lingus, or at least I came back there actually for 5 or 6 years afterwards. But I left the job and I went to Maynooth on I think it was the 17th of September, was it 1983? I remember the day. And that's when I started in Maynooth. And
it was busy then, that time still. Maynooth, wasn't it?
There was about 650, 700 students in Maynooth. And in my class, there were 100 first years. I mean, unbelievable. Today, there are something only about 60 in the whole of Maynooth. Like, they'd be lucky to have about 4 or 5 first years, It's such a world away,
It is. And that time, of course, then you had, I know what it's like, as I was telling you myself, I was away to thinking as well to be a priest, and you didn't have much choice in it. But anyway, look, it was a very positive experience as far as I'm concerned. But you were in Maynooth. How long did you spend there, Noel? I
was there about 3 to 4 years in Maynooth. I kind of was there and I absolutely enjoyed it. I would never change 1 minute of my time in Maynooth. I loved it. And I'm very fond of Maynooth, and I go up there and I love staying over occasionally. And my daughter went to college there, so we've still quite a connection. And a lot of my classmates, obviously a lot of them left, but a lot of them stayed. Some of them are bishops and things like that. I am a musician. Like, for instance, the Archbishop of Armagh, Eamon is actually a trumpeter, right? And I actually played many of the time. I'm a flute player, but I played with him. So, like, I do know clergy all over the country, really, and internationally a bit, because, you know, at the time, as I said, it was a very big college, and you got to know an awful lot of people, and people in the Limerick diocese as well, you know. So it was wonderful. And when Grania graduated some years ago in Maynooth, Eamon Martin came, you know, the Archbishop, and we had a lovely few pictures, and that he remembered me well, you know. We had a good old chat. So yeah, I loved my time there, and I was very influenced in terms of the diocese, let me say, which many people may remember, of a man called Father Liam Kelly. He's passed now, but Liam was in the Holy Rosary parish, which is quite across the road from Art Scholarvation. I was involved in the Holy Rosary folk group for years as director, and I got very friendly with Liam, and Liam was a great mentor to me to go forward in Maynooth.
And no, not to labour the point. I mean, some people, many people think that and faith is very important. I know by the way you're speaking, faith is important, and it's important to have faith in something, because everybody has ups and downs in their lives, and faith obviously is important in your life.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would still, you know, I'm still the holy water man, you know, for my mum. Like, you know, whenever we're going anywhere, I'd make sure that they put the holy water on. I'm not a holy Joe now by any stretch, but, you know, it would mean a lot to me, you know. And I stepped out of Maynooth, by the way, Pat, you know, kind of an accidental situation, really, you know. And I had a wonderful opportunity, funnily enough, related to my time in Maynooth. And that was, as I said to you, I used to go back to work in Aer Lingus and Shannon in the summer times. And it was terrific. Apart from the fact that I was earning lots of good money, and that I also had a lot of international travel pretty much free. So, you know, in the times that I could have a little bit off, I was able to go. But anyway, back, I don't know what year it was, I was about third year or something in Maynooth. What happened was that British Airways, who were in Shannon at the time, asked Aer Lingus, would I go and accompany this poor man who was an Irish Australian, would come home to Ireland and had got, I think, brain cancer or something serious, and he was terminal, and they needed somebody to bring him back. It's a bit like an unaccompanied minor, you know. So they asked me, and British Airways asked Aer Lingus asked me, and I travelled, I remember, to London with him, and then we went from there to Sydney, Australia, and I handed him over to his family. Now, there was a few stops along the way, but it was a wonderful opportunity. I was only 21 or something like that, you know, 22. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I had a visa, an emergency visa, which could have lasted for a year. And I was so kind of taken up with my studies and wanting to come back. I was actually late for my opening year retreat. They weren't that happy in Maynooth at the time. And Bishop of Limerick, Jeremiah Newman, was very supportive of it. And anyway, I did that, and I got to visit my aunt, which would be my mother's sister, who had immigrated to Australia many, many years before, in Adelaide. There was a lot of Irish over there, and I flew to Melbourne and to Adelaide, stayed for a bit of time there. So the whole thing was about 2 weeks. Got back to Ireland, and but I loved that, again, that situation. The poor man is well gone now. I'd say he didn't last too long after that, but it was a privilege to do that, and I was probably ill-equipped because I was so young. You know, I wouldn't have been used to looking after somebody like that. But anyway, we did the deed, and you know, I went back to Maynooth, and then sometime later that year, then I decided to step back into layland as such, as a lay student. And I decided that I wasn't going to be a priest. I just kind of wanted to step back a small bit to see what way things were. And I ended up then doing the HTIP, which is the kind of the equivalent of the PME now today for teaching education after my degree. And I got a job working in CBS in Lucan, which is just outside Maynooth. And I was really, really lucky there as well in my HTIP. Normally in Maynooth at the time, you worked Mondays and Fridays, and you went to college Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, and like that was fine. I was living in Maynooth or wherever during the week. But anyway, so a few weeks after I started in CBS in Lucan, it was a Christian Brothers school again, the principal called me and he said, Noel, he said, would you mind taking over Mr. whatever, I can't think of his name's class. He's gone out sick. I said, oh, that's okay. But how do I do that? I said, because I'm supposed to be in college on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Don't worry about that, he says to me. I look after that with Manu. So anyway, I took over this man's class, and
Yes.
it was unbelievable because I was only about 23 or whatever, and I was being paid every week. I mean, it was like unbelievable money, I thought, because I hadn't really experienced it. And so I worked actually throughout the whole year and did my, never attended lectures except one during the week for Professor Coolin. But I had some good friends and they helped me in terms of the studying and that. And I ended up with an honours dip in the end. And I got great experience. And I learned more in that dip year than probably most of the rest of them, because I had actually a full-time job effectively,
And my special guest this morning on LiR Confidential is Noel Malone. And please subscribe to the channel. It's free, and this is probably the only thing you'll get from us from free of charge in this neck of the wood. But Noel, how long did you spend in Lucan then?
Just 1 year. It was my dip year. You only did 1 year at the time. Now it's 2 years. But like as I said, the fact that I was actually being paid, I was effectively teaching fully. I wasn't just coming in, and the supervision was scant. And I remember the late Professor John Coolhan, if you've ever heard of him. He was the professor at the time. He was extremely supportive and helpful. And I remember years later when I went to Croom, and I think it was the Irish Times article about it, he wrote me a beautiful letter, personal letter, which I actually featured on my LinkedIn page because I just loved it so much. I'm very proud of it, complimenting me on that. But he was a great inspiration as well in terms of education.
Now, you eventually wound up, how did you eventually wound up in Croom? Was it 99, 98, 99?
Yeah. Well, I had my first 10 or 11 years were spent in Copsford College, Salesian College in Pallaskenry. And when I came back from when I came back from Lucan, I had no job. It was the summertime, and my sister saw a small little ad in the Limerick Chronicle, small little thing, and she had for an incremental post in Salesian College in Pallaskenry until Christmas. Now, incremental, if you're in the education line, it means that you get paid at the time from the 1st of August. So before you even sat in the school, you had a month's pay under your belt. It was very attractive when you were 23 or 24. So I met Father McIntyre. He was the principal at the time outside in the school, and he hired me, and I was delighted. And it was only supposed to be until Christmas, but Christmas became the rest of the year. Then it became the second year. Then it became the third year. And what happened was that the job was meant to be one of the Salesian priests, and whom I actually turned out that I knew from Manu, but he had actually decided to change course and do something differently. So I ended up getting his job. There was a priest who had retired, an absolutely giant of a man, head of English out there, Father Pat Donnellan. And Pat had retired. He was still on the staff, but he was retired officially. So I effectively took on his role, and I actually became head of English, and I was only out of college. And like he was a big act to follow. No, I'll tell you that. But that was a wonderful opportunity. And at the time, the boarding was finishing up in Copsford and Pallaskenry, and Father McIntyre, all the boarding areas there were being cleared. And I suggested, well, what about a computer room? Now, I know that sounds like absolutely normal for today, but believe me, in 1990, that was very unusual. But I had a big kind of interest in that whole concept of technology and education. So he was fantastically supportive, and we set up our first, I think we had 25 computers. They were, if you can recollect, 286s. They weren't even what you call today. PC.
I remember the 286s.
Yeah, with 20 megabit hard disks. Hard disk 20 megabit. I mean, you just wouldn't believe it. So I have some lovely pictures of that, and we were the first, I think, school in the region, and certainly we had the most sophisticated computer lab nearly in Munster, certainly, because it was so new, and we had great people to come out of that group. So I ended up teaching English and ICT predominantly for the next 11 years,
Yeah, and obviously you were well suited to teaching, Noel, because, by the way, you're speaking this morning and talking to you were well suited, and you had a good rapport all the time with the pupils as well, and of course pupils always respond. I'm not an expert in this. I've been only at the other side of the desk, so to speak, but they always respond to encouragement and positivity. I know it sounds trite to say that, but really they do, you know.
Absolutely.
And as you said, the innovation of having a computer room, a state-of-the-art computer room. I worked for a company in the late 80s, early 90s, and our company, IBS, we equipped the Ursuline Convent in Thurles. I remember going into Sister Brushman. She was a dynamo, a real forward-looking. We supplied all IBMs that time with them, all IBM computers. But you know, really, people like yourself and like her now, I only know her personally, who has the foresight to look down the road. That's what it's all about, really. That's what's important. And you spent 8 or 9 years there. And you moved into Croom at the time. It was a secondary school, obviously.
Yeah.
And what position had you there then when you moved into Croom?
Yeah, I was 11 years in Pallaskenry, and funnily enough, it turned. The time of my departure was kind of reasonable in the sense that Father McIntyre, the headmaster, was also moving. So just it's the way things happened, and I applied for a position in. I had been transport officer in Pallaskenry, so I was dealing with the school transport in and out of the city and that. And within that, I got to know the people in the BEC, the Limerick County Limerick BEC, people like Sean Burke and that, who were the CEO. So when a position came up, it was actually, again, quite accidental. I was actually on holidays, and my sister, they keep seeing these things, my sisters, but anyway, they saw the advert for Croom, and I had already applied for a position in County Limerick BEC the previous month. And I was abroad, and my sister went and she said, look, there's another school, St. Mary's Community College, it was called then, in Croom. And I really didn't know much about Croom, except that you used to drive by it when you were going to Cork. That's as much as I knew. So I said, sure, I'm away. And but at the same time, I had the application form for the other school right in my desk at home. So my sister said, no, I'll go over and I'll send it on for you, you know, because it was the same thing really, basically, just to change the name at the top, which I did. She did, and then came back from holidays, and I didn't think much of it. And then suddenly I was called for interview, and after the process, I ended up getting the job. But I mean, it was like, let's say it wasn't planned, it was accidental, like a lot of things that had happened to me in life. And I got the job, and really was so sorry leaving Pallaskenry, but I was excited because I was kind of an ambitious kind of a young lad, and I kind of wanted to do something, you know, I was mad to do things at the time. And, you know, that was the one offered to me, and ended up coming to visit the school with Sean Burke, I remember, and there was only 12 teachers left in the school. There was only 86 students. And I couldn't believe it, because I came from a school like that had about maybe 500, you know, and I couldn't believe there were so few students there. And it was very sad, really, the situation. The school had declined quite considerably, and it needed something radical. And to be honest, Pat, when I walked in the door and I was met with what I was met with, I actually wanted to go out the back door back to Pallaskenry, but it was too late. The job was done, you know.
What job did you get there, Noel? That time?
I was the principal. I got the principalship, yeah.
You walked into St. Mary's Secondary School, it was known then.
It was called St. Mary's Community College. It was a BEC school in the traditional sense of the local tech, you know. And it had,
I remember the old one. I remember the old building.
Yeah.
You know, I remember calling, because the company I was with, we had to do all the schools, cold calling them all. I remember.
All right, yeah.
I remember going in there and I was saying, I won't do any business in here anyway, you know, which is sad. And that's not a reflection of the staff or anything. It's just the atmosphere and the feeling you get. But anyway, you arrived in there, and you didn't go out the back door, as we know. You stayed. And what kind of a challenge then? I mean, you had so many challenges to take on in that school. Obviously, the first one was to improve what you think should be improved, but also try and boost the numbers, you know. In retrospect now, looking back, it's easy to say from you went up to nearly 1,000 pupils before you left. I mean, I can't get my head around that anyway, but anyway, can you, Noel, get your head around?
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing to think back about the way things were. I mean, there were only actually about 6 first years on my books when I came in. I mean, literally, it wasn't much of a handover from my predecessor. And I got it up to 12 by the time 1st of October came. That's a key date for school numbers. So that was 100% increase anyway. But the problem really was, there were so many things. I mean, the infrastructure was dreadful, I thought. The school had got, whether it's deserved or otherwise, it had just got a spiral of decline. And, you know, it's very hard in schools, and like everything else, if you get a kind of a bad situation, it doesn't easily fix itself. So right. I kind of, because I came from the outside a small bit, the staff, give them their due, the 12 that were there, they were very demoralized, but they were very supportive. They kind of saw this was the last gasp. Subsequently, I think I heard that really the school was going to close at the end of the year, and I would have been the kind of the last principal there. I don't know what they would have done with me, but anyway, that didn't happen because the way things changed. But fundamentally, Pat, if you can recollect, well, first few things that I kind of felt we needed to do. One, we need to change the name of the school, so we changed it to Colosh the Ciarán, right? We changed the unit. There was pretty much a dreadful uniform. We put in a very strong uniform. I'm talking about with shirt and ties and blazers. I mean, I wanted to outdo the others, you know. Number 3 is that brought in a whole sense of discipline and order and whatever. Painted the school different colors, you know, inspiring photographs, inspiring things like teamwork and that. And then went around to the classrooms. I remember in my first year there, and first couple of years, you know, trying to reassure the kids that this school could be the best school in Ireland. I used to say this, you know, and like they used to laugh at me, I'd say, and the staff, but like I just believed it. But apart from those kind of things, which are really important, the reality is that how could I get kids to go to the school when there just wasn't enough of them around? And because the school had declined in years, a lot of the transport from the school transport system had stopped. So, you know, the school transport only operated, there's enough people using them. So really there was no buses coming into the school at all. So if you can't get kids to the school, how do you get them? And then the problem was that there was a bypass built from Croom, if you can recollect, around that time. So even Bus-Éireann buses, the ordinary buses, were only going in there maybe once or twice in the day, and it certainly wouldn't work for a school setup. So I was really in an awful state. So I tried with the DEC, they couldn't really help. I tried with Bus-Éireann, they wouldn't help. I tried with the Department of Education, they weren't interested. Nobody was interested in really sorting the problem out because they said, well, you know, what can we do? You know, you don't have the numbers. So I was kind of in a vicious circle. So what I did was, part of the success of the school at the time was, as I mentioned to you earlier, my interest in ICT. And I was very influenced by Bill Gates and what was then known in the 80s as Microsoft Anytime, Anyplace. So kids, I suppose it would be the earliest laptops you could think about, right? So I kind of said, well, okay, we'll do something really different in Croom, something that no one else has done in the country, and make it, you know, something, you know, extraordinarily, you know, unique. So we started getting laptops, and I approached Dell, and Dell were in Limerick, and they were very supportive, and I made some very good connections there. So Dell supported the laptops, number one, and they did for years and years and years, all the way through my time there. Oh, yeah. Wonderfully, yeah. But they also, and significant financial help, but also, and the kids and the parents, of course, as well. But also, very importantly, they supported the purchase of a bus. So I ended up getting a bus.
You bought your own bus.
We bought our own bus, and not only did we buy one bus, we ended up buying 3 buses. And like, in other words, if you can't kind of bring the mountain to Muhammad or whatever. So the buses then went everywhere we wanted. We actually hired the bus driver. We charged the kids because there was nothing coming for free. But what we did was, because I was very conscious of the fact that, you know, this is a disadvantaged school as well, and parents didn't have the money for that. So what we did was we came up with a fee that was reasonable, but also it was one for a family. So in other words, if somebody sent their kids and they had 4 kids, they only paid the cost of one.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's only one payment.
One payment. And that was probably unfair on the people with just one child, but I got over it, but it worked. And we sent the bus. People might remember seeing our Coláiste buses because there was Dell and everything. There was a lot of stuff on it. They were very nice. And they went around the nooks and crannies of the North Circular Road. They went in every corner of Limerick, right? And they brought kids every morning, and the kids would be waiting at their bus stop in their blazers and everything. And in a sense, they sold the school themselves. And then that led on to other buses. Then I was still outside the school transport system. No way would they bring kids from the city. So we started then hiring buses. So eventually, I think we had, by the time I finished there, we had about 12 or 13 buses, 3 owned by the school itself, which was a lot of infrastructure, and then the others subcontracted out. But still, the school were the people, charging. So that the other companies had to oblige or operate in terms of whatever we had set, and that worked really, really well. Funnily enough, the year that I finished, the Department of Education finally, after all the years, decided to admit Coláiste into the city catchment.
The bus scheme.
The bus scheme. So like now and for the last number of years, kids can avail of the school transport as if they're going to their local schools. So that's a huge plus. But we did it on our own for all those years. And
I didn't know that. No,
yeah.
I really didn't know that about buying or getting your own buses.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the whole infrastructure was missing. And how supportive of the VEC? I mean, there's only so much anybody can do. I understand that because I've been a civil servant in the department. I know how things move very, very, very slowly, And
in fairness, Sean Burke was the CEO for most of my time, all my time practically in the VEC. Sean was very supportive of the school. He had been a former principal at the school, and years before, so I think he had a particular mass on the place, and really, he didn't spare in terms of the support, in terms of the infrastructure. Now, I think he probably thought I was completely off my trolley doing things like buying buses and things like that, and got everyone into all sorts of trouble because when that article appeared in 2011 in the Irish Times. I remember, there was an interview, and I have a copy of it. Maybe you've seen it, but there was I mentioned in it, I think, or somebody mentioned about the buses. Well, my God, the Department of Education didn't know about it, and they were hot foot onto Sean Burke, the CEO. What's this about buses and all that kind of stuff? Where who owns them? How did they fund them? And then I remember the VEC, of course, were on to me, and I had to do a big report on that. Everything was above board, of course, but you couldn't say that I was conventional, and Coláiste was far from a conventional secondary school.
Now, of course, my special guest is Noel Malone with us here this morning. We're delighted to have you, Noel. Now, Coláiste, obviously the size of the school became problematic quickly because of the numbers, I presume.
Yeah.
And then that challenged you in all sorts of ways again, and the staff.
Well, basically, we became prefab city. I mean, it's terrible, and sometimes I used to be quite hurt, but I could understand how past pupils sometimes say, when will this ever end? Because we had something like 20, 30 rooms which were prefabs, and kids were operating in a very, I would like to think at a very high level in substandard situation. It's just not good enough. I mean, the main building was fine, but that was only fractional for the school. You were dealing with prefabs all over the place, and it cost the department a fortune. And part of the reason, really, again, a bit like the success breeds success, or what happened was that the school was growing so well. I mean, we got something like within 2 years, I think we had got something like school up to around 300 or something, and then just went up and up and up. By the time I finished, we had 175 first years from the time I started with my 6. So I think that was pretty good. Because the drain on the infrastructure of the school was quite enormous, and yet I wanted to provide for them as best I can. And what happened was that they had decided that they wanted to build a new school, and that had been decided then after a few years. And they had arranged a plot And it was being built for 500. But then it became very obvious the school was going to be way bigger than that. So then it was going to be 600. Then it was going to be 700. And eventually it was going to be, I think, 1,000 or 1,100, right? By the time we got to the end of it. But we had all sorts of problems with planning. You know, the EDC, with the best of intentions, there was objections, the land, and there was, road works, how to get there and all that stuff. It was just mired in that for years and years. And it was soul destroying to explain this to parents and to kids who I'd be promising, like when they were in first year, now lads, you'll be in this now by the time you get into third year. And by third year came, I'd be saying the same to the first year. It was very disheartening. But we kept with it, even with all the technology and that, we still got over all that. And the school still, people believed in me, believed in the school, believed in the staff and the concept. And, they came from far and wide. And despite the infrastructure, let's put it that way, they stuck with us. And, the laptop initiative, for example, was so unique that, without fear of contradiction, there wasn't another school in the country that had anything like the level of, forward thinking that was going on. We were only tipping the iceberg. And a lot of the stuff now, I'm afraid, well, I'm not afraid, I'm glad in some ways, but, it's become current. The stuff that we were doing years ago now is essential, right? And part of the pandemic issue, where it hasn't worked, Pat, is because schools years ago didn't prepare like stuff that we were doing. They didn't do what they were doing. The Department of Education to do it, and then you have a crisis, and then you're trying to pick up the pieces when maybe there isn't the kind of the setup there. So yeah, to answer your question a long way, yes, they were as supportive as they could be, but we were really, really under pressure about the new building.
And when did it get finished, Sean?
No, yeah. Well, the new building itself, actually, only this year they actually moved in December, like the end of last year in January. Really? Yeah, that's how long it took. And by the way, since I left, the school then started going into a bit of a decline, unfortunately, and the numbers were changed. So the school, I think, has been built now for about 750. I could be wrong on that, 750, 800. So, the numbers are down, but, it's a fantastic building. And thankfully, I was very much part of the planning and the design and that. And it's just an absolutely wonderful building. And, I'm sure it will last into the future.
On November the 1st, 2011, the Irish Times, is this Ireland's best school?
Yeah.
1st of November 2011 in the Irish Times. I looked at it across the other ones as well. It went from 251 to 905. That time, the pupils I'm talking about.
Yeah.
In 1999, it had 86 pupils, and 2011 it had 905. But Sean or Noel, is this Ireland's best school? It was rated number one on all the matrix that they used, whatever things they use in the department, I don't know, but at least, for Coláiste Chiaráin to be rated number one, I'm thinking now, of course, I'm a bit biased, being from Cork City, you'll have CBC and PBS.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have Pres and Christians, all these schools that trip off the top of your tongue.
Sure.
And there's Coláiste Chiaráin, top of the pile.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about the expansion and the numbers and all that, which were obvious. We were also scoring really, really high in terms of our academics. A lot of our kids were well up there in terms of the university. And remember, Pat, this was a DEIS school, a disadvantaged school. So that's very important to remember. You're talking about kids that came from situations, some of them. Now, there was it was a very wide body by the end, but certainly in the earlier years, who may not have had much encouragement at home sometimes in terms of going on to college, may not have had the resources to go on to college, and needed to be kind of nudged. I remember there was one particular girl that strikes me just in terms of that, and obviously I'm not going to mention any names, but I remember she came into me upset, right? It was around maybe 3 or 4 months before the leaving cert, and she said, "Sir," she said, I don't think I'm going to go to college. And we had been encouraging her for a few years to go to, she had an interest in primary teaching. Now, she was a wonderful girl. Anyway, she said to me, I don't think we can. And I said, well, what's wrong? What can we do? Is there a problem? And basically her parents had decided that they needed her to go working. They couldn't afford for her to go to college. I'm not talking about fees. I'm not even talking about maintenance.
They needed family. Yeah,
they needed her out there working. So I was actually devastated, and she was very upset. So anyway, I did what I could with some of the staff, and we made a few calls, and we got some extra supports, and we encouraged the parents to give her a go. And anyway, that girl, now I haven't spoken to her for many, many, many years, but I know that she became a primary school teacher and is teaching now. And
fantastic. That's fantastic.
That's just one example. You know?
I know, yeah, out of many, Noel. Now, you spent, as I said, you left in, when did you leave Coláiste Ciarán?
My retirement date was the 1st of January 2019. So I'm retired now 2 years a bit.
No,
and what will I say is that I wanted to do something really interesting and different, even though I've been in education all my career. So I had remnants, I had visions of my mum asking me that I should have been going into being an accountant. But that was never going to happen. But so what I decided to do was I was very interested in the executive MBA out in UL. I'd never gone to UL, and the MBA was something that really caught my eye. So I approached them, and they were absolutely very, very supportive. And I took on that course for the last 2 years, and absolutely was transformative. It was the most wonderful course. We kind of lost out a small bit at the very end because of the COVID, but we got the best of it. And in fact, I met with my class group there only a few days ago. And it was the first time we'd met since March 2020, because of the COVID. And like so many of them have got on so well, and their companies. There's about 35 in the group, the MBA, males and females, very much high achievers, people, in all sorts of industries, some in the public sector, mostly not. Just fantastic people. And the highlight, let me say, Pat, was it last year or the year before? Yeah, I forget now, it was the COVID business, but the last time we had a normal summer, that would have been, I suppose, 19 or 20 or whatever. We went to Silicon Valley in the States, in San Francisco.
Oh, goodness me.
Part of the MBA. And it was the most wonderful, and I've been around the world, but I mean, for all of us, I think, without a doubt, we found it one of the most wonderful and I suppose, great learning experiences, because we got to meet all the big companies and the Irish people who were really running Silicon Valley. You'd be amazed the amount of people. Some from Limerick, actually. There was a guy that I had gone to school with in Art School. He's a very senior guy in Intel. We got to meet all these people on a personal level. We got to see San Francisco and the whole setup. Oh my God, I thought I was 25 again, because the opportunities that they have and that young people have today, are just fantastic. So that MBA, gave me exposure to things like, finance, international finance, economics, business administration, HR, all the things that I was probably doing an awful lot in my career as a principal, but didn't know what I was doing. I was doing it kind of naturally, Now I kind of understood. And actually, one of the courses that we did, which was during lockdown, just the only one that we ended up doing kind of online, was negotiations. And I found that really, really good. And I laughed to myself because a lot of the stuff that I was doing in my career was kind of negotiations, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was doing it kind of, naturally from the gut. But there is a whole wealth of good research there on negotiations and how to handle people and how to deal with people maybe in conflict, which I probably could have done with many years ago beforehand. So honestly, I couldn't recommend the MBA in UL any higher. It's just a great experience,
And of course, Noel is referring to there as the Kemmy Business School in UL, University of Limerick. Linda's name to Jim Kemmy, who we began the program with. So it's kind of full circle with the Kemmy name in your case, Noel. So you've done that. Now let's go back a little bit. You were involved in the Limerick Boat Club for a while, and of course, you do have downtime, I presume, do you?
I do, yeah. Well, I started rowing with Limerick Boat Club. I think I was about 12 or 13. And it was kind of accidental, because one would think I would go to Atlanker Boat Club, which was only just down the road. I think at the time, there was nothing much happening in it, Lunkard. And my dad was very friendly with a guy called Noel Griffin, who's still with us. And Noel was the captain of Limerick Boat Club at the time. And Noel, my dad, you see, was a big rugby man. And again, I was such a disappointment. I didn't play rugby either. So I think he was anxious for me to do something, you know, rather than reading books. So he encouraged me to come down, and Noel Griffin said, I'll send him down. And the rest is history. I loved rowing. I just took to it for years. And I rowed all my time there, and we did very, very, very well. I mean, then I ended up becoming a captain. I was never a vice captain, I was captain, and I was secretary for years, youngest secretary, youngest captain. In fact, the late Tony Tyne, who just passed away some weeks ago, who was an incredible man and did so much for Limerick rowing, he wrote a book, and I was very privileged to come along. He asked me, I helped him in some of the dates and things that happened. But in my captaincy, I'm glad to say we had the most successful year in the history of the club in terms of wins. We were really energetic that year, those 2 years. And then, so we had a great time there, and I met wonderful people, and my own kids ended up rowing, and rowing is very much part of this family. And I became president then. The year I got married was at 92 and 93. I think I was the president for 2 years. And I'm a trustee and have maintained my link with the boat club all those years. And we found it's very difficult because, you know, we lost our roof. If you've seen it, you're passing by in Sarsfield Bridge, you know, you Shannon on one hand, who are the most beautiful building, and we're the kind of the also Rams at the other side. But we're there 1870, we're not going anywhere yet, and we're very close to replacing that roof. And when that happens, the club will reignite itself. It's very much involved in recreational rowing for the last number of years. Older people may be rowing and that, which is great too. So look, my involvement in rowing is been a huge part of my life. You know?
And did you get to see the lads in the Olympics?
Oh, I did, yeah. We've met. I didn't meet them, but we were down we go to West Cork, the family, quite a bit. We love, Baltimore and Skibbereen and all that. Sure, I was down there around the time of the Olympics this year when the lads were rowing, and it was absolutely crazy. But I remember, was it the last time that they were in the Olympics, we were down in West Cork as well at the same time, and we met Paul and Gary's mum. My lads got photographs with them and all that kind of stuff. Look, it's just fantastic sport. And, you know, years and years ago in Limerick, people rowed in one part of the year and they played rugby in the other half. So it was always a connection. And my dad was very supportive of the rowing. He loved the fact that we were involved as well. And as I said, all my kids have rowed, and some of them continue to, and even my wife, who had no background in rowing, I remember years ago we persuaded her to do a coaching course. So we've all been very much part of rowing and the rowing family nationally, it excites us. Every time, once in the year, for example, you probably see it as well, the Oxford boat race, the famous one. If you're ever around here and around that time in March, I think it is, the TV is on for the day. We just love it. And the whole background to it and all that. And obviously, there's a whole regatta around that. I mean, apart from Cambridge and Oxford, there's a whole huge thing around. Rowing is just an amazing sport, and Limerick is huge. I had no idea of the extent of it until the lads won the silver that time. Yeah. In where was it on? Tokyo, was it? Tokyo recently, yeah. Where was the one previous before? One was in where was it? Was it London? It wasn't London, was it? No, I can't remember now myself. Anyway, when they won it, when the O'Donovan brothers got the silver, I mean, that was really. And then you get into the minutiae of the things, and of course you had people on the television who were experts and who would be involved and giving. But the ladies as well did very well in the Olympics as well. The girls did very well. So I think it's a very healthy sport, any sport, but it's a very healthy thing to be involved in, Yeah, and we had a rowing club out in the school, I mean, we had our own official rowing club. Yeah, for years, and my own kids rode with it, and we had great successes, and like we had great potential going forward in that whole sport. And like, again, a little bit before our time, because very few schools can do it. While some schools may have a club, they're kind of connected to a main club, and they kind of only maybe row for their school, maybe on the school's regatta once in the year. We actually had an actual club in the school, and we had, with great support there from the likes of James Mangan. He's outside in, he originally would have been from the Croom general area, but he actually works very much with Castleconnell Rowing Club and with UL Rowing Club. A fantastic guy with great experience, and he was the driving force there to support our club out in the school, Coláiste Corán Rowing Club.
Now, Noel, what's on your plate next? Do you want to divulge it at all? Or what?
Jeez, God only knows. No, I mean, I've had a few possibilities in terms of where I go from here. Like, I don't want to hang up my boots because I'm not quite over the hill yet.
Yeah.
The NBA has given me a whole new lease of life and a different perspective. So I'm looking at a couple of different things, but I haven't quite found what it is yet. I'm involved in Rotary as well in Limerick. I don't know whether you're aware of that. And that again opens me to the likes of Tony Brazel and all these guys, Fergus Quinlivan and that, who are giants in terms of the business community here in Limerick. And we've done great work. They have done fantastic work over many, many years in terms of supporting. You might remember in the Christmas tree, you see it there on O'Connell Street there, they have the big tree where we hope to do that again this year. We're forming a new Limerick club just at this moment. So I'm kind of involved in that. But I haven't really found where my hat is going to fall quite yet.
Well, now, and you will reveal all to us down the line, because we'll have to come back to you, Noel, with a part 2. But,
oh God, if there is, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we have a few more ideas to run by you, but not on this show here. Sure. They're all secrets. But for this edition of LiR Confidential, it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure, Noel, to see you so healthy as well, and well in yourself and happy. And it's been only just scratched the surface of a tremendous educator and continuing to do good things in the community. So for this edition of LiR Confidential, from myself, Pat Barry, and Noel Malone, goodbye and God bless, and take care, Noel.
Thank you, Pat.